We're not going to raise national insurance. We're not going to raise personal taxes. So that would, and we're not going to raise VAT.
So no increases to those headline rates of those three taxes. Does that include the tax thresholds, though? Because in theory, those will remain frozen as they are under Conservative plans, which raises tens of billions of pounds extra for the Treasury.
So what happens in reality, I'm told, is that every time that there is a budget, the Chancellor needs to look at thresholds. And I'm not really in a position at this stage to tell you what the thresholds will be. But I can tell you that we won't be raising those three taxes, the main taxes that are the taxes against working people.
So there's a chance that you could change those thresholds. The party hasn't settled its position on that.
It is what I just said. So it's up to the Chancellor at each budget to decide what the thresholds are on individual taxes. And I can't predict sitting here in your studio today what that will be, but I can tell you that we won't be raising taxes on income tax, national insurance, or VAT.
The reason I ask you that is because that promise on income tax is a bit more complicated if you take those thresholds into account. Because if you don't change them, it drags lots and lots of people into paying higher rates of tax. Johnny Reynolds from your shadow team was asked about this a couple of days ago, and he did admit that Labour would be increasing taxes because the Tories have planned to do that, and you're sticking with those Conservative plans. So is he wrong?
Well, what I can tell you is this, is that, and you'll see this when we get our manifesto launched, is that all the things that we say that we're going to be spending money on, we can say where the money comes from. And where we say that we will be raising taxes, we'll be raising taxes on, we will be claiming VAT on schools, for example. We will be closing some of the tax loopholes. We will not be allowing non-DOMs to get away with taking the mickey the way that they have been. So we're going to do all of those things. But
Yeah,
most
but I
importantly,
think
perhaps,
the reason
let me just make
why,
the,
well,
let me
if
just,
it's on
let
the
me just make the final
specific
point,
if it's on the
which is,
specific question.
hang on, let's just make the final point. You see, you don't just raise money just for the sake of raising money. So we'll be raising money in order to save, in order to spend it. But you will find that when you see our manifesto, everything that we are pledging, we know where the money is coming
Yeah,
from.
but you
So
see, I'm
it
asking
leads
you a
us to the
very
next
specific
question as
question
to
because you're
why it would
promising
be.
people that you won't raise taxes, but you will raise taxes under current plans because you will keep the thresholds where they are, which means that people will be dragged into paying more tax. That's why I'm asking you about it. In fact,
Yeah.
the Institute for Fiscal Studies has accused both you and the Tories of a conspiracy of silence, that's their words, on public spending. You've just said that where you are raising money with tax hikes, you will explain how you're going to spend it. But they're saying you're not being honest with the public about how bad things are. Because if you stick to government spending plans, which Rachel Reeves says that you will do, that's £20 billion of cuts in public services.
I've told you what we're going to do. We will have a fully costed manifesto where we will say where it is that we're going to be spending money, and where we're spending money, we have made it clear where we will be raising money. And I've also said to you that when it comes to thresholds, I'm not in a position to tell you this sunny Sunday morning in your television, in your radio studio, what levels the thresholds will be. It will be a matter for the Chancellor, and as you've already said, we hope that will be Rachel Reeves, but nobody's voted yet. I can't help you any more than that, Kate.
Okay, but let's take what the IFS has said about unprotected spending. They are warning that under government plans, which you say you will stick to, there is unprotected spending on prisons, justice and local government, which means £20 billion of cuts in those areas. How are you going to avoid making those £20 billion of cuts?
What we're saying this morning is that we're going to build 20,000 places.
I'm sorry, Emily
in
Thornberry.
prisons.
I'm asking you a very specific
Sorry,
question.
okay.
We can talk about prisons, but
I
I
thought
would
I
like
was
to
talking
ask you.
about. I thought I was going to talk about our announcement on prisons.
Yes, and I'm
if
going
you
to
want
come on
ask
to
me
talk about
prisons,
that.
I'm
I'm
happy
going
to
to
talk
come on to
about
talk
those.
about that, but I've asked you first about those £20 billion of cuts because lots of people expect that Labour will spend more on public services, and the IFS is saying you're not being honest. There's £20 billion of cuts to those three areas I've just listed. How are you going to avoid making those cuts?
I mean, you know that one of our pledges, one of our first steps is to transform our economy. We need to grow our economy, and we have very specific plans as to how we're going to do that. We're going to introduce Great British Energy that will be owned by the British public, and we will make sure that we are We're greening our economy. We are making sure that we get green energy and we will bring down people's bills forever. But we will also be ensuring that there is investment coming into this country to transform our economy. And it is only through growth that we will be able to expand the amount of money that we put into public services further than those that we have specifically said. We are being very clear about this, and we get criticized for being so clear about it and not being ambitious enough. But what we want is we want to be able to say to the public, you can trust us. We have told you what we're going to do. We've told you where the money is coming from. And we have said to you that we have very bold and ambitious plans to grow our economy. This is how we're going to do it. It will be hard, but it will be exciting because we're going to turn the country around.
So are you
It's going to
saying
take
that?
a bit of time, but we're going to do it.
Yeah. So my question was, how are you going to avoid making those £20 billion of cuts? And your answer is Great British Energy and growing the economy. So is that the answer to that question? In your first year of government, you are going to avoid making £20 billion of cuts to public services by growing the economy.
I think that if you want any more detailed answers than the ones that I have attempted to give you, and I appreciate you're frustrated, I'm obviously not giving you sufficiently good answers. But if you want better answers, you better get somebody from the Treasury team in.
But
But
this
I think that
affects
I've given you
prisons.
fairly,
This affects
fairly,
prisons, and
fairly,
this is your
yeah. And
area
I
of
tell you, oh, let's
expertise.
talk about prisons. So,
But that
so
is
we're
my
going to
question,
build
Emily Thornberry.
20,000
Forgive
new
me. My
places
question was
after.
about prisons. My
Okay,
question
fine.
was about unprotected spending on prisons and justice, which are two areas that you are expert on. There is scheduled to be £20 billion of cuts to those unprotected departments. Those are prisons and justice. And I'm asking how you're going to avoid making those cuts.
Well, I don't frankly know what the state of the economy is going to be until and unless we are given the great honor of being the next government, when we will be able to look at the books, we will be able to look at it in detail. We don't have a detailed analysis of, just where the money is and what it is being spent on in the way that we would want to, because we're the opposition. And obviously, understandably, you don't get to see it.
Well, then how
But
can you make
but
the
if
promise on
the
not raising taxes?
because sorry, it brings me back to what I said before. Because the things that we've said that we're going to spend money on, right? The new things we're going to spend money on, we've said where the money is coming from, right?
But I mean, you must understand why it's quite a difficult argument to follow. If you can tell people that you're not going to raise their taxes, but you're telling me you can't explain where cuts are going to fall because you haven't seen the books.
I don't know what else I'm supposed to say to you, Kate. I mean, I've given you a fairly comprehensive answers, and for the last, like, I don't know, 10 minutes, and I'm quite happy to talk to you about antisocial behaviour, about prison places, about violence against women and girls, which, to be honest, is what I thought that I was coming on to talk about. I think that and if you want more answers, then I think probably the best thing to do is to invite one of the Treasury team on who may well be able to give you more detailed answers
We can go
than
on
I
to
have
talk about
given.
those things, but you're asking to talk about prisons, justice, and violence against women and girls. And those are exactly
Yes.
the areas where unprotected spending cuts are going to come down the track. So they are exactly why I'm asking that question. But on prisons, you are planning to force through new prisons. You've said that the decisions on them will be made by ministers, not councils. So will local communities get any say at all?
Yes, what we're doing is we are going to build the 20,000 places that the government has promised for years it's going to build, but they've only managed to build for 6,000 places. There are two sites that have been identified. There is money that has been identified, and yet for whatever reasons best known to the government, they have not gone ahead and built. We will do that, and then we will look for further sites. And what we will do is, if necessary, the Secretary of State will take control of the planning process because prisons are of national importance because of public safety. So we will need to do that. But obviously, the Ministry of Justice will liaise with councils on concerns that are raised. For example, there may well be concerns about traffic and public safety and so on. And it will be important for the MOJ to work with local authorities and local people to ensure that when the prisons are built, that there is as little disruption as possible.
So
But we do
can
need to have more prisons built, and we're
can
going to
local
build
people
them.
can local people overrule those decisions? Is that possible?
The the decision will be made by the Secretary of State because it is of national importance. There is a national responsibility to ensure that we have enough prison places. At the moment, we have police officers instructed to arrest fewer people. We have courts that have been told to delay hearings. We are releasing criminals early. This is because our prisons are overcrowded. We have 87,177 people in our prisons at the moment, and we only have 88,914 places.
Yeah.
There is a crisis looming, and we will do something about it.
The other element that you're talking about today is specialist rape courts, and it's something that a lot of people will welcome. There is already, though, enough space in the courts to hear these cases. The issue is there are not enough judges or barristers. So how many more staff will Labour provide in order to hear these really important cases quickly?
No, no, that's not right.
That's what Rape
Um,
Crisis says. That's not me saying it. That's Rape Crisis.
well, that's not right.
So Rape
What's
Crisis are wrong. It's not about barristers and judges.
there is usually a 3-year wait going on at the moment between a crime being committed and getting it to court and getting it before a jury. And there are a number of things that are being held, that are holding it up. But the difficulty with the courts is certainly one of them. And the huge waiting lists for getting cases into the courts was happening before COVID. The waiting lists were getting worse and worse, and now waiting times have of course got even worse since COVID, but they
Yeah.
continue to increase.
And
And
everybody involved
what we're
in
saying, hang on, what we're saying is that given that there is a limited amount of space and time, we will prioritize rape cases and make sure that they're getting through faster than they are at the moment, which is taking 3 years.
Yeah, and everybody wants to see those cases go through more quickly. There is not one person who doesn't. But I have to tell you,
Yes.
it's not about space. There is space in our courts that goes unused every single week. It is about a lack of staff. It's about a lack of judges and barristers and specialist staff who can hear these cases. So how many extra staff will Labour be providing in order
Hey,
to
you can
ensure this can
assert
go as
that.
quickly as possible? It's not me, it's Rape Crisis.
Yeah.
They
No,
are
no, no.
experts in this area. I'm not an
Yeah.
expert, they are.
No, you're not. I mean, I've spoken to the Criminal Bar Association about the number of rape of people who are qualified to prosecute and defend in rape cases, and it's right to say that we need to have more, and there are reasons for that. That people are leaving doing rape cases. It's because essentially of the front loading of cases. So what happens is that you get early hearings before the actual trial, where there's supposed to be case management meetings. And in order to be ready for a case management meeting, you have to essentially have read through the case and prepared it entirely. And the difficulty is that many of the people who do the case management hearings are then not available when the case comes up for trial because the cases are being shoehorned into courts because they have to take advantage of where there is court availability, and then the barrister's not employed, and they then don't get paid for the original work that they did. So the problem then is that the temptation is, well, if I'm not going to get paid for this, why would I bother to do the work? So then you get case management hearings that aren't sufficiently effective. So we do need to look at that. And and some of the things that we have been talking about are the amount of money that has been earmarked for there was a government initiative which was to interview the victims of rape at an early stage and put it on tape, and for them to be questioned about it, and for that then to be put almost like in the can and then used when the case came to
Yeah.
court 3 years later. But that is not really happening. Money was earmarked for that to happen. It hasn't happened. And one of the things that the Criminal Bar Association has said is that that money should instead be used for the payment of the early
Yeah.
hearings. I think
Okay,
that's
Emily
an
Thornberry, I'm
interesting.
sorry,
I mean,
time is
sorry, but you
against
asked
us.
about the
No, I
details
think
of
we've
this.
got
I'm
the
quite happy to talk
details.
about the
You are
details
the
of that.
nominated spokesman for the Labour Party this morning. You're a lawyer. You've worked in foreign policy. I want to ask your reaction to the Israeli raid overnight to liberate 4 hostages and, according to the Palestinians, kill in the process several hundred civilians. The EU Foreign Affairs spokesman says it's a bloodbath. What do you think?
I think the first thing is that I welcome the fact that these hostages have been released. I'm really pleased for them and for their families. I I'm beginning to hear some of the details of some of the some what is supposed to have happened. I think that what we need to do is this just underlines again the importance of having a ceasefire, because if we can get a ceasefire and if we can start moving on a political solution to this, we will make sure that all the surviving hostages are released. It is really important that this happens. It's really important that the hostages are released, and it's really important that everyone, no matter who they are, applies international law.
Okay, and final question. How does this affect, or how is Labour going to recognise the Palestinian state when there isn't a Palestinian state? And if there is, it's probably controlled by Hamas. I mean, how's that going to work?
Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to recognize, as I think we said, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state as part of a peace process. So it needs to be part of that ongoing process. And first of all, we need to have a ceasefire. We have to have a ceasefire. We have to stop the violence. And then we need the international community at last to properly focus on this ongoing problem and ensure that we find a lasting solution, which is a two-state solution. And you can't have a two-state solution without two states. And the second state needs to be recognized. And we need to have a secure Israel and a viable Palestinian state. And that has to be part of the negotiations, and we have to be
But
really
at the point
positive
that there
about
is a
it.
two-state solution is when you'd recognise, is that right?
The only solution is a two-state solution. We have to move towards that. And as part of those negotiations and as part of those moves, obviously it will happen in a number of stages. There will be a time when we will recognize the Palestinian state. It has to be part of that process, and it is really important that it happens. And it is not in the gift of the Israelis as to whether or not there is a Palestinian state. There will be a Palestinian state, and the international community will ensure that there is one.
Emily Thornberry, Shadow Attorney General for Labour. Thank you.